Hi, we're here with Tara Barshand of Emerald Cities Collaborative in Oakland, California. And tonight is Meridian University's Integral MBA in Creative Enterprises webinar called Collaborating for Change, the Long Game. And we're really excited to be doing this as part of our current class called Emergent Thinking in the Creative Economy. And these cross-domain conversations are so challenging for people. This came up in a workshop that I was doing this afternoon. Also, people asking about how do we get people to really honor and value the process that's needed for us all to be able to find shared perspectives, shared agendas, to really understand how we're going to brainstorm together, how we're going to imagine together, how we're going to define and take action together. And this is what Tara does every day. So we're really looking forward to what she brings to this webinar, and also to the interactive conversation that we'll have with people who are participating. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Tara to say some initial comments, and we'll also be doing a screen share of her presentation.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, tell me when you want it to start, when you want the presentation.
Sure. So thank you, Nika and Tiffany and Claudia, for joining the conversation. Before I actually, start with the PowerPoint, I just wanted to share that I am in no way an expert. I haven't written white papers. I haven't written books. What I know is collaboration is a step-by-step process. But I have learned a lot over the last. Actually, it's 9 years, because both of the organizations that I have come through in my work around economic development and equity were collaboratives. I started at Greenlining, which did a lot of things around policy. That's where I started, and knew immediately when I heard of Emerald Cities and what they were doing that was the on-the-ground implementation of the policy effort. So I was very excited to actually be in an engaged process around making stuff happen. So what I did with Tiffany, with Nika, is Nika said, let's do something. And I literally, in 20 minutes, sent out, okay, here's my thing. So then I went back and I had to actually develop a PowerPoint around it. So I might go off PowerPoint as the conversation goes. But I really just wanted to give sort of a thought process of what are the things that I have learned over the last 5 years. So here we go. Why don't we go ahead and start?
Okay.
There we are. Collaborating for change, the long game. So I'll start just giving you a little context. Emerald Cities was initiated 5 years ago, and I have been with it. I am the oldest director. They call me the senior because I've been here since the beginning. And it was created around an initiative called the ARA dollars, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, which are the dollars that were coming through the huge recession. And the reason that is important is because it speaks to the next slide, which you can go to, is what is your long game? What is your purpose and what is your vision? And where are you heading and to what end? And so my collaborative really had a strong vision and a purpose. And I was actually a part of a year of engagement in order to define what that purpose and vision is. So the first thing that I will share with you is, even you need to have, it's like tilling the garden. You need to have something you're envisioning. You need to have something in sight. You need to have time to develop it. You need to know what are the strategies in place. So collaboration is that it's hard work and it's a constant engagement with people. So before I go a little bit more to like some of the details of how things came about in my organization, I am curious about, there's Claudia with a picture. Great picture, Claudia. What are you guys engaging in around collaboration, and where are you either one in an existing collaborative that you are you're informed, or is there something that you want to create that you want the understanding of how to develop a collaborative model?
So whoever's ready to respond to that, go ahead.
Hello. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I've been a part of a lot of informal collaboratives. Collaboratives that usually come together for a certain thing. So, like, when I think about my work, I think about me being a cultural worker, and I worked a lot, like on sometimes a global level with Pacific Islanders from all across the world, depending on kind of what the issues are, and so that's kind of where my heart is, and many different initiatives have come out of that kind of like informal collaborative of people just getting together, having like minds, and then wanting to do something. Mm-hmm. It's never, that piece of it has never been formal, and it's never been where we sat down and tried to figure out a purpose and vision. In fact, for I don't know why all of us were pretty resistant to that, to like sitting down and like figuring out what purpose and vision and planning. Folks are really not, folks didn't really want to do that. There's a lot of resistance. And then like in my other work, when I worked in HIV and AIDS, we did do a lot more collaborative work with other organizations that were much more formal, so that they could push an agenda at a national level. But my experience of that has been like everybody gets together and everybody's galvanized and everybody gets along. And then when it goes towards the end, then everything seems to fall apart. I don't have very many experiences of collaboration, like working.
Actually, I just want to say that's very much the experience of collaboration. So in any way.
Yeah. So like later on down, like 15, 20 years out, things have fallen apart, and organizations are not friends, and they're not allies anymore. They're not working together. Everybody wants their piece of whatever it was. For the work I did in HIV and AIDS, and then for the work I've done with Pacific Islanders, people's lives just changed. And, some people wanted to do, self-determination, and some people wanted to do work on issues of climate change, and some people, so then people, there was never like a formal block. It's been driven by, whatever it was that people wanted to do, and where their passions are, and where they wanted to spend their time.
Thank you. How about you, Claudia? Anything?
So I was busy. He was getting my technology sorted, and I logged in on my iPad now, so that seems to work. So I do understand now two questions. So what is my longing? Yeah, and what experience do I have with collaboration?
Yeah. So in this session, what are you wanting to know about, and where are you in a collaborative space? Is it something you're already involved in and you're in a collaboration, or is it something you're seeking?
Yeah, I mean, my background is I'm coming from filmmaking, so this is probably the prototypical collaboration on a very big level, because you do work it's collaborative work. I mean, film is not a one-person show, and you have to collaborate on many different layers, starting the creative aspect, the financial aspect, the time aspect, and so on. And one of the reasons why I love making movies is the collective collaboration element in there. So at present, I'm actually very interested in expanding my experience in terms of creative collaboration into other fields of really working with teams that are non-local. and finding means and ways how this could possibly be done. So I have quite an array already with long distance collaborations, and I feel that there is an essence in there that is a power in there that has not been yet utilized.
Got it.
In my own longing, I hope that technology is aiding this process, so that really people of like-minded visions and ideas can collectively collaborate outside of their need to be in the same space.
Thank you. I just want to lift up what you said about your experience in filmmaking. I was actually a performer for years. And so it speaks to this, because in theater or in movies, there's a story and a vision, and you have a clear idea where you need to get to, and then everyone agrees, we want to get there. And who wants to come, who's going to have what skills, who's going to come to play what roles. And so there's really a collective conversation that enrolls everyone into the outcome, to which they have some benefit, some learning, some experience, and then you have something to stand on. And so that's a perfect, example. You really need something that people feel excited about participating in. And I think for Tiffany, when you're in initiatives, there's moments, but if it's not formalized, it becomes very easy for people to step out. They participate as they need, they go away, but it's the vision that really calls people forward to even more than they initially thought they were going to participate in. And that's what's exciting, because then they evolve and grow in that space. So what I wanted to just share is my Emerald Cities mission, vision, because a vision is different. And so ironic, because we sat with our national staff today and we had an hour conversation deciphering vision, mission, objectives, goals, initiatives. And of course it was incredibly lively and everyone was very confused because words are so semantic. It's very hard for people, they understand it differently, but I think people get vision, and vision is something that's lofty and it's big and it enrolls people. So Emerald City's vision is to green our cities, build our communities, strengthen our democracy. Green our cities, build our communities, strengthen our democracy. Something you can't do overnight. That is a long-term goal. And then further, we want to do it through deep retrofits in the American regions, through energy efficiency, prosperous environments. We want to do expand training, labor standards, support growth, well-paid green workforce. We want coalitions that support, that are accountable and they're equitable. So these are, these are like big things that people spent a year designing what it was they were going to enroll. And so I think the first thing that you have to know is, why are you at the table and why are you excited? And immediately I think you know people to bring in. Like you immediately know within your own system people that believe in that, whether or not they're policy advocates that you work with or economic development advocates. You immediately have your first group of people. And then as you start to define your vision, what comes up is, what are the people and who do you need in place? Go to the next slide. And as you were saying, Tiffany, it's really hard to get people in process, but you have to come to an agreement. You have to have an idea of what everyone sees, and so everyone brings their own little piece, whether or not it's, I want to work with women, I want to do labor standards, I want to, have policy change, but you're all coming together for that goal. So you have to ask yourself, who's going to join me, who's going to stay, and how are they willing to partner? I think this is really important, what I have learned, and especially in this collaboration that we're doing now with this new initiative called Anchors for Resilient Communities. Are they willing to partner? Who are you bringing to the table? Because people will come to the table for their organization's self-interest, but you have to understand, how are they contributing? Is it contributing through capacity? Is it contributing through, funding? Is it contributing through skills and expertise? Sometimes it's just, they are motivators, right? Like, you know, I'm a director, so I'm by myself. So I actually need people in my space who are the coalition organizer advocates, because they're the ones who are going to engage the community. You know, they're going to be the ones going to be able to take your thoughts into action. So are your stakeholders going to partner, and who will join you? So those are the things that you want to look at. And then the agreement and the engagement is, it takes time, and you have to set up a structure so that people, first you can see right away, like, you know, because if it takes you a year to come to an understanding, you're going to see who's interested, because that would be a very quick vetting process. Mm-hmm. But you really want to put it out. You want to get principles, objectives, goals. One of our principles is around social enterprise and helping low-income communities create businesses. And that, you know, 5 years in, we're finally getting to that principle, right? And, you know, so that was part of a larger principle, but it took 5 years of our other work to actually find the right place for that to start to show up. So that's why this long game conversations, you don't know what's going to be the first nut, and then you don't know what's going to come up that's going to be rich, and that's going to actually grow in the garden that you're creating. So next slide. And so this goes to the next, and I'm sort of doing these slides, and I'm like hoping I'm having the appropriate process thought. This goes to listening and feedback. So in your collaboration, you're really wanting to listen to what's happening with your stakeholders, you know, what's happening in the community. And because that's where fruit starts to come up, because you have an idea of what your goal is, and you have an idea of what your vision is, but you don't know what is actually potentially more ripe to bring up into your space. So like, for example, in film, like Claudia, like, you know, you have an idea of what a storyline is going to be, but the characters or the artists hit something, and it's something that's innovative and rich. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, maybe I should divert the story over here, because this is something that's really rich. And how do I include their performance, what they're giving me that wasn't originally in the script? And a good production team or a good director will at least open up to that prospect, right? Open up to sort of exploring what that may be. It might end up, you know, being edited on the floor of the film process, but a good editor and filmmaker will say, this is something rich and I want to explore it. So I'm curious for you guys in your listening and feedback environment, where did you find new things that showed up that you weren't expecting, that were surprising to you, that you know, what weren't, you know, necessarily your initial intent with the stakeholders?
And you might even think about this in the context of the marketing research that you did last quarter.
I think that, well, I had asked the question to I did marketing research on the Pacific Islander community and makers in the Pacific Islander community who made lace. They would make all kinds of cultural items. And when I asked them the question, like, you know, what does economic sustainability mean to you? Or what does it look like for you? Almost everybody, their first initial response was that they didn't know. Like, they had no clue. They never thought about it. Some people didn't even know what that meant. And I think that was the most surprising. So even if I didn't call it economic sustainability, more like, how do you pay your bills over time? You know, have you even thought about how you're going to do that? What surprised me is that people didn't have a long view of that, especially the makers, you know, not the intelligentsia, but the people, you know, just like regular people, you know, that there was no long view of that. Everybody was still in survival mode. So that was what was surprising to me.
And in the course of discussions and enrollment, did they start to see?
Yeah, like after I explained it to them, and once I expanded what that meant or gave them some examples, people understood, but it was more like I was planting seeds.
Mm-hmm.
So because none of the people that I spoke to had any real plan. It's not like some communities where people know that they're going to save for their children for college. That's not even a,
And
they don't even think about that. That's not even something that's in their purview. So that was interesting. It really, I think, made me understand where my community as a whole was. At least the ones that were in Oakland, like in the Bay Area, like a geographically located community. Like, oh, we're still in survival mode.
And it's really important within collaborations. One of the reasons you want to set up these structures, and that, for ours, it's like we have quarterly meetings for a certain group of people. We have monthly meetings for other sets of people. We have newsletters that we send out. It's a way of engaging them and listening to them and getting their feedback. And taking a tone in the room, like, what's the temperature? What's going on here? Who's getting frustrated? Who's not feeling seen? Who's showing up all the time, but they're not getting a benefit? Who's showing up all the time and demanding results, but not giving anything? It's a way of really understanding what's happening in the community, because and so I'm coming from the perspective that I hold the collaborative space. I am responsible. I hold the council. So my role is to do that. It's listen, to hear the feedback, to understand where there's challenges, where people are potentially, our stakeholders aren't, beneficial. Show up where people who are doing a lot of great work but aren't asking anything and wanting to help them be acknowledged and celebrated. And in that, as I write here, in this listening and feedback with a collaboration, this is where you build the trust, because then it becomes it's the vision, but now it's a new family. It's like almost now there's a time where it's like they belong. And it's not just a meeting. It's actually something that is part of who they get to show up and engage with that community. And I think that's one of the difficulties with a lot of collaboration is that it takes time, it takes trust, and it takes building upon something. And then in those cases, those communities start to become friends. And even if they're like, not good friends, they, it's like, you have a family member you don't particularly like, but you learn how to work with them. You learn how to align what you're doing, even if you don't necessarily agree head to head. The next one.
Yeah, I just want to add in that when I was in my doctoral process and I was doing research on collaboration, one of the striking comments that I read was, you don't actually have to like your collaborators in order to collaborate well.
Very important.
Yes, and so it's not all like kumbaya. It's not necessarily singing together around the campfire.
Yeah, and in fact, when there are stakeholders that you really do have the kumbaya, those are the ones when things aren't going well. You sort of go, can we be so kind? I need to feel good in this space right now. So, as I was directing the conversation, I was saying that, my role as a collaborator is to actually hold the collaborative space. And so I don't know if that's the role that you guys are currently. Is that something that you see yourself as sort of the anchor? Or are you in a collaborative and you want to move that collaborative in a different way?
How about you, Claudia?
Yeah, I can really see that as a very important role as the person who's, and there are probably different words. I mean, you're bringing in the word leadership. It's also the person who is the space holder. And so looking back at our marketing research, which led to these prototypes here, the
Nice.
sound responsive and with different meditation cycle light sculptures. So we are working with a team of 5 people, including myself. It would be 6, and so this is a true collaboration to work on this. And so there has been a lot of frustration and at times also anxiety, because people put a lot of labor in there, and everything is unpaid right now. So we still have not launched our Kickstarter because it's not ready. So just to keep the ball rolling, and I understand the parameters that you're introducing to us, and they're actually very important. And it reminds me always back on my film work, because as you said, you know, the story might just take a new turn. And really playing with this, dancing with this creative engagement in a team is actually really challenging. Is really challenging, but it's also likewise very exciting. And I think one of the things is really to be open to really letting the collaboration also so that something comes out of there that I'm, even though I'm kind of was part of the initiative core of this piece here, for example, but also letting it grow and move into whatever it will become.
Great. Yeah, it's you are I mean, when I'm hearing you, you're in this subset of 6 people, so it's a very intense engagement, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so then it's probably more emotional than, say, my engagement, which I have a set of co-chairs that I have to meet, and there's 5 of them and me, so it's 6 people that we meet once a month by phone or by person. But the actual projects are outside of those folks, so there's a distance. So when we're looking at this leadership, a variety of roles, if you're the holder of that space, it can get very hot and uncomfortable. How do you step back so that somebody else takes leadership? And then how do you assert yourself stepping forward to actually move things in a direction that is important?
Have you had
that experience?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think this is a constant dance, and I personally I really feel it is important to give space for leadership to other people, so that there is a distribution of the weight. So in all my professional engagements, I always had multiple of me and multiple voices coming up and speaking by themselves. So I'm very firm with this, stepping back myself and letting things go and just notching it in the right direction. You're writing, moving stakeholders in the new directions. It's almost like, yeah, now you go this way. Yeah.
How about you, Tiffany? Have you had experiences of, and I guess this also goes to this thing, or introvert, extrovert thing. You know, is it uncomfortable for you to step forward, or you somebody who tends to step back, and then, you know, what brings you to step forward? Who are you usually in terms of that role?
Oh gosh, usually I'm a resource person. So my leadership has always been because I have offered things that a group has needed or a community has needed. So throughout the time that I've ever been a part of groups that have collaborated, I've often had resources like space, you know, access to money or fiscal sponsorship agencies, or And so those are the times when I step forward, is when I have something to offer most of the times. And then also when like shit hits the fan and people, you know, like you just kind of have to step up. You know, it's like a lot of times in almost all the groups I've been a part of, I have been an administrator / finance person, like by default. Like it doesn't matter what group I'm in, I'm the one that's having to deal with reimbursements and, you know, like, you know, since a lot of the groups are informal, like where can we get a fiscal sponsorship agreement, you know, those types of things. And I think it's frustrated in me because I want to be the person that gets to do more fun stuff, I guess, versus all the really hard stuff that people never really wanted to do, but needs to get done. So that's kind of like when I've stepped up and stepped back. And I also like to appreciate people.
Yeah.
So that lifting up good work really resonates with me, because I really do like to give gratitude to folks, especially folks that that people, like, they may not be the quote unquote leaders in terms of they're not the big speakers, they're not the people who lead the workshops, but they're the people who like make sure that we get fed, you know, like those. I mean, in Pacific Islander communities, everything has to have food, right? Like those people that make sure that they go out and, you know, like deal with caterers and space, and, you know, like I really, really appreciate those folks, because those folks are oftentimes for us the backbone, not the people talking so much or the people in front of the media, but it's those other people that make it happen. And I really like to highlight that.
It's and that's actually a really important for you if you're holding the space, is to note that, and then to be able to act on it. So when you said, you know, the people who always speak, right? You know, in my own collaborative, I have one person who, when you get the floor, we often don't get the mic back. I am very, very conscious when that person steps up that I am prepped to take that mic away. I have to.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the conversation won't highlight other people, and I will then hand the mic to somebody else. And what's really important is be able to help the person who's uncomfortable or not. Like, say you were in my group, I would create the space for you to step forward so that you would become comfortable in the space of being heard and seen, so that you would step into it. And so that's really important when you're holding a collaboration, is to have these many skills. And again, I'm going to Claudia's work in film. I mean, it's like, it's a perfect learning ground, because it's a heightened space when you're doing productions, and where all the emotions are showing up, and you're going to navigate people. And it's really the thing that gave me that fostered my talent, so that I can actually move very adeptly in all these different communities. And Tiffany, in terms of lifting up good work, you know, in a collaboration, when you highlight other people's work, again, they find value being collaborative, right? It's not about the end. It's not like, oh, we didn't succeed in our vision and mission. It's like, no, actually in this space, I get seen and I get resourced and I get acknowledged, and we're building connection. So the collaboration, you know, really has a lot of fruit to bear. It has multiple purposes. You create the space for this vision, but if it's a good collaborative, people start finding value out that's beyond the actual vision and the mission that you set up. Which leads me to the point of moving stakeholders forward. You know, when you are in a space that's so vibrant, you do often have to say, okay, we need to get over here, right? Like, because you're the holder of the collaborative space, you have the macro vision, right? They're coming in every so often, but you have the macro vision. And so you can foresee where you need to go. And it's how do you move those stakeholders into that space where they feel like you weren't forcing them into that space. We're going to do this now. It's, I have been listening to policy. I've been looking at the economics. I've been hearing about the foundations. These are the things that are lifting up. This is what's, happening. And then you get a lot of resistance from your collaborative because they've been invested in the original conversation. And now you have to sort of say, we actually, if this is a work product, like the product that you're making, Claudia, it's like you have an idea of where it stands and like where you want to, bring it up, and everyone's in agreement, and what's the community you're going to sell it, the avenues you're going to sell it, and then all of a sudden something shows up, and you're like, oh, that's a good idea, and then but it would change everything. You'd be like, all that work, how do I get folks over there? So I will give you an example of what happened for me in my work and how it's become extremely fruitful. So Emerald Cities is around retrofitting the built environment around energy efficiency and targeting public infrastructure. So for 4 years, I was doing this. I was in community colleges. I was in the school districts. I was working at multifamily affordable housing. I was trying everything, but I was not getting an actual project. But in all these conversations where we were holding these spaces, I was aware that there was this building momentum around food and, local agriculture. And even though that wasn't energy efficiency, that has to do with efficiency, that has to do with sustainability. And I was very aware of that. So I kept my toe in that table, even though that wasn't my stakeholder table, because I kind of knew that that's where we needed to be present because it had so much energy. 2 years later, we are aligning with a strategy called the Anchor strategy that came out of the Cleveland Institute, Evergreen, where you target a anchor institution of the procurement dollars and then target businesses and jobs, knowing very well what the money is in the course of 5 years, 10 years, and targeting the business potential. And that fruited within my collaborative as an option, and I was already on the ground in the garden. So I was already tilling the soil. I was meeting the folks. I was very aware of it. And they said, this is what we want to do. And I'm like, I know the people. Let's set up the table. And that has gone boom, like fire. Like I know the folks, the Anchor strategy. We've got the people in meeting. So it's being curious, right? It's always being aware of what's coming down. Now, it had repercussions, and they weren't always good, and they're still not always good because a lot of the stakeholders, they wanted that other thing, and that didn't bear fruit. It's not that I'm leaving it behind. It's that it's at a more stasis position. So let's get on this other thing because the goals are the same. It's economic development, it's equity, it's sustainability, it's education, but it's a different field. So I have to balance the one voice that's like, shouting out, this isn't and I'm lifting up the other voice and saying, what are the possibilities? And so they're going with me. So it really, again, it's always this dance. But you want to always have stakeholders at the table, or what you hope to cultivate in those first 2 years is not only trust, respect. You've got to build respect for yourself. And that's important by, one, showing people that you can produce, but it's also about saying, I want to do this, and this I know, and I need to move this forward. And this is speaking to Tiffany about, going from the position of only being resourceful, but saying, this is what I claim, and I think this is important, and starting to develop your voice in that space, because then people hear that you have something, you have a vision, you have a goal that they can align with. And I wanted to just highlight I put the introvert versus extrovert on there because everyone assumes, and even I've assumed all my life, that only extroverts are leaders, right? And I'm not a natural extrovert. I am an introvert. I love people, but I can do only so much energy, and then I need all of you to be away from me, and I need to go home. And so I had to really navigate like holding this table of people and engagement, which is so exhausting. But really being able to nurture myself. And then how do I use my skills as an introvert to actually move things forward? And one of the things I noticed as an introvert, you are more strategic. You see things differently. Extroverts are just responding, and introverts are looking and noticing, and so can see things. So everyone has their value. So it's never to assume that it only looks a certain way, and a leader is only, one type of archetype.
Yeah, and actually, one of the things that in Meridian, in our leadership development, we're working on harmonious movement between the introvert and the extrovert.
Interesting, yeah.
Because you want to have all of that reflective capacity and the the ability to sit in observation, in witnessing, and that kind of thing. And you also want to be able to move out there into the world and externalize, and explore and all of that. And so it's not this, black and white, either or type of situation that we often hear people talk about.
Yeah. Or the people who are lifted up are always the ones that are so charismatic and funny. And then you're like, but you realize that they're dependent totally on 10 people who are like strategists who are making it happen. So this, I brought up the flexibility, that the change is necessary, because I've noticed in I've been 5 years in.
Wow, that amazes me. Like,
and
wow, you have to be 5 years.
5 years in. And what's so fascinating is it's as if we're starting still. Like you can see where we built up our value as individuals and as the collaborative and as the coalition. But the first 3 years, people were like, poo-poo, who is this people? Now people are like turning to us because our vision was so succinct and so clearly defined that it became the things people want now at their table. So that's why it's really important to find a very distinct and important clarifying vision, because it helps you ground yourself. And then that can be applicable to different things, but it's still very clear what we're doing. It is high road jobs, it's equity and access for disadvantaged communities, it's union pathways, and moving the green economy and accelerating it. Always has been, will be, continue to be, and it's altered depending on whether or not it's policy or multifamily affordable housing or anchor institutions or social enterprise, but the goal has always been the same. And so,
which speaks to the complexity.
Which speaks to the clump,
that of course it's going to move across all of those things. It's not some singular fix, and okay, we, done and dusted and we're moving on now.
Yeah. And it's interesting. The reason it's complex, the way you stay there is because it's actually fascinating to watch yourself as part of a system. We are part of a system. So I'm curious about, I brought it up in the last thing about the change, and I was going to ask you guys, do you recall moments when you had to, shift gears and go somewhere else that was a success, and you were happy that you, sort of developed something that people stood in, and you were able to move groups to another direction?
Wait, can you
repeat that? Yeah. So
yeah.
I was sharing my example of how I was very thoughtful in my one collaborative table, or my, the collaborative table, that there was this other exciting groundwork happening. And I knew that we needed to be present for that. And then I was able to be, as I said, I was ready when the offer came. So 2 years of me just sort of investing in that space. And then when the fruit came to be, everyone wanted Emerald Cities to hold that table. So is there an example in your own work where your intuition, I guess what I'm saying is your intuition told you that you needed to be open or direct yourself in another way, and then you were able to follow up on it?
Instead of following, like, this is the plan we made and we're marching toward the plan no matter what.
Oh. I'm not so sure.
How about you, Claudia? Anything?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, ongoing. And I think the birds, in particular for this, the lambs, is actually a good example of this, because originally we were aiming at larger sculptures, and we have built one last year for Burning Man Festival, and we thought like, oh, this is great, so now we can just take it to different places, and this will open up more spaces in terms of corporate art and thinking big. And then this didn't really happen, and then we had to really rethink our plan and really going smaller, and being really more flexible. It is actually really straining, because in particular financially, you may have made a certain framework for yourself with a certain income stream, and then if it doesn't happen, and if it takes a longer time to really produce, and more investment in research, so that's really I think it's challenging as a leader to hold this space and healthy, and we lost some people on this process. Gained others.
I want to just highlight the idea about the money and the funding, and just to be transparent, I don't have to raise the majority of the money. That's mostly being raised by my national staff. I do raise money and funding, but it is really hard, because when you have a board or somebody who's overlooking your work, and you commit to money that comes in, you're obligated to that money. So
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't want in any way want to not acknowledge that is part of the responsibility. And currently, as we're working on our board, we're also saying, how do we look at our vision statement and our objectives and our funding, because now that we've been around for 5 years, we actually understand more what it is we're doing. So that's part of the thing about a collaboration, is you start with a vision and an ideal, and then time really tells you what it's really. Yeah. So you got this money to do something, and it's like, that's not going to happen. So we need to, we need to change it, because we've now been on the ground for so many years, and we're getting a clear idea. And then that often means you have to let go of funders or funders, invite new folks to the table.
Which is always hard, right?
Yeah, because you don't want to lose. I always get 50,000 from that person. I can put that in the initiative somehow. But it also constrains you from time.
And I'd actually like to comment from my experience, because the nonprofit that I worked with for many years, that worked with low-income women opening businesses, had this experience with funding where funding came with such specific strings attached that it often took the organization, in the process of trying to collaborate with funders, it took the organization off track, off mission.
Yes.
Like force them to do things in order to comply with the expectations that really in the long game did not serve the organization. And I was there. Yeah, I was, part of the witness of that. And so you think, oh, we're getting all of this money, and we're going to be able to do this, and we're going to be able to do that. And then it's so clearly earmarked in ways that are not really going to move forward the real work that you want to be doing, and it actually distracts the organization from what they're trying to do. So it can be for better or worse, right? That you can find some things that intuitively you feel, like your story, Tara, you know, there's something here and we want to stay with that and that kind of thing. But then you can also have these influences that are going to change you in ways that is actually potentially destructive to the organization.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a tough road to navigate that.
Yeah. I mean, particularly when it comes for creative funding, I have been, and currently I'm working on a few other projects, trying to find the right framework for them. And when it comes to public funding, film funding, and so on, so there's so many, not only the requirements, but those structures are outdated, and so they are related to certain old paradigms that are not really applicable. And on one hand, they're asking for innovation, but then there is really no clear format forward. So it's actually quite challenging.
Yeah. Yeah.
To be in that moment of transition, to come up with innovations and I think particular, I mean, since we are in an MBA program, so we want to co-create an emerging new economy, but we're still sitting in the old forms, and it's a difficult place to be in. Really difficult place. Yeah.
Speaking of old structures, what are the structures that you've set up in place for engaging your collaborative? And I'll share with mine. It's, as I said, it's like monthly meetings and quarterly meetings and newsletters. So those are, you know, we don't meet on Zoom. I don't know how to do that, you know. So I'm like, I'm still in this old space of like having like calendar and call people and second. It's a lot of work. So I'm curious what kind of structures you're putting in place to meet and engage with your collaborative. That's, you know, maybe.
Yeah. So I'm using, and I'm actually this is one of the things that I'm really kind of digging into right now to understand what are the tools and means. So one thing that I'm using, and this is something that Nika and I looked into. So I'm using Vigio as a communication platform for one of my projects. But this is kind of not really satisfying, and then I'm still trying to find like a visual aid that is more, because it's a creative project, yeah. So where components can be just thrown in, and then it's Skype. But all of this is very disconnected, and I personally envision, and that might actually be part of one thing that I would like to engage more in. To finding people who have the same problem of really developing platforms that can really do that, where content and documentation, and also where a project process, Vigio is actually quite helpful in this, because I can really see how the communication is going off in different parts, and then all the associated elements from budget, from design drafts, from really essential elements are all collected in there. So it's actually really good to have a collaborative platform.
Yeah, and something that's accessible in terms of price too, because we're not talking about multi-million-dollar companies.
Exactly, and this is actually where I'm stuck right now a little bit, because there are many like amazing other applications, but they are going way beyond any entrepreneur startup processing. Yeah. So yeah, it's an interesting part. So what is the technology that really offers us to do that?
And then how do we, one of the things I've noticed is you lose sight of old technology that's really important, like picking up the phone and calling people.
which I find so important to do.
Which is like, oh my God, I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
I'm 17.
Yeah. No, I think a healthy mix of different parts, and then there's also this, and we do that too in our class. And I think I often see our classroom, or the way how Meridian is taught, as a prototype for those processes, because we do have Zoom like now, we do have an online exchange, and then we have also in-person meetings and gatherings and inquiries that we're doing, where really the physical presence to each other is really important.
And when you do that, I mean, and I know we're getting your time, I know people resist. I've gone to meetings where there's no agenda. You get there and like there's nothing, and I can't go to a meeting without having an idea of what. And possibly it's because I'm usually the person coordinating the meeting. I'm like, what am I trying to get out of this meeting?
Mm-hmm.
So is that structure, agendizing, like, and that's probably not a word. Still
Go for it.
being used. I mean, like, where you get together for a reason, you have an outcome, and you say, did we accomplish this? Because again, this goes back to the vision. Like, you gotta have clarity.
Yeah, I think I really liked how you started your presentation. So what is the purpose of a gathering? What is the purpose? What's the potential outcome? So what do we want to achieve in our time? And really measuring this outcome by its cooking, so to say. Saying like, okay, well, are we, after like the time is over, maybe another meeting is needed.
Well, and a lot of times meetings end and you didn't have clarification, and then you go, what did we accomplish? Because you didn't have a purpose and agenda in mind in the next step. So you could say, okay, we said we would do this next.
Yeah. Or follow-up notes.
Or just the simple way of minutes, just taking the notes. I mean, this is also really, really important to have that clear in collaboration. I think to have that, these are the notes, and other things that we did discuss, and out of this we have a certain to-do lists, follow-ups.
Time tested.
Yes, that's a very important part too.
I think that some of the processes that we're using now, like in our MBA program, even when we were at in our intensive with Meridian, is that there's a lot of reflection that happens. So so when Nika has us doing something, like, if we do something together, there is also a reflection that is shared, and we all comment on that. I think that's a structure that I want to take into my own collaborations. Because people can be in the meeting and they're present and maybe they're not, like, you've got to manage a lot when you're in meeting about something, right? But then when you have time to walk away, a lot of other things come up. And I think that in the 21st century, in this new economy, in this my new business, whatever it is that I want to do, I really want to impart the the reflection piece, making sure I like how we as a group reflect. So we're going to have, like, we're here with you, and then Nika's going to tell us that we need to write a reflection about what we've learned.
Right.
And I think that is part of the new story, is that reflection is much more structurally interwoven into what we do.
It's great that you bring that up for two reasons. One, I don't have that in my collaborative because I've been on this path of, like, building and making it happen, and yet I'm calling restorative justice circles, and everywhere I go, you need to have restorative justice circles. You need places where people can talk. And you're reflecting back to me that's actually something I can continue to adopt in my own space. Which again, it's like you're constantly learning. You're remembering what you forgot. You can reapply it. So even just lifting that up, that's actually something I would like to bring into my collaborative, is a reflection of the last 5 years with my stakeholders.
It goes back to the previous thing about lifting up good work, because that's part of what I think both of you are talking about in our classes too, is that we reach back and we pull through the threads of, here were good ideas, realizations, insights, foundational pieces, so that it's not just this forced march where you're never going back and saying, well, what does that really mean now? As we look there, how is that relevant? What does it mean? Does that good work have more value now than it did then? Or, that's so important. It's that spiral process, right, that we've actually lost a lot of, because it's our perspective is so linear in most organizational structures, you know, whether they're collaboratives or whether it's a corporation or a government or whatever. There's, you know, yesterday and then there's tomorrow.
Right.
They're just marching forward, right?
But we do it in real time as well. And I think the timing of when we do we're not waiting 5 years to do a reflection.
Right.
You know, we're doing it like an hour later or a day later, or it's not, you know, we're not doing something for 10 years and then wanting to reflect back on it, because there's a lot of learning that's rich when it's near what you've experienced.
Yeah.
You know, so. You
know, so on that note, like, it would be really good for both of you to go into your journals tonight.
Mm-hmm. See, I told you she was going to make it. Can I ask one question? Because that has to do, and it is about the relationships. But, so, you know, so we started off this conversation, like, informally, and I was talking to Tara about Oakland and just how much it's changing, and so many people wanting to be a part of the city and finally seeing its potential. And I think that is happening all over the world, right? Like, is there a type of personality that makes for better collaborators? Like, if there's like a list, if you could give a list of capacities that good collaborators should at least be proficient in. You know, like, do you have a short list or a long list? Or because
what I always put in there is that they know how to laugh. You have to have humor, because when things are tough, you've got to be able to smile and forgive yourself. So I would say collaborators are people who listen. They're curious. I think that was on the last slide. You know, you're somebody who's open eyes, open ears. They cultivate curiosity. They ask questions. You know, they naturally acknowledge people, and they look for celebration, but they're also willing to look at things, hard things. So I think it's somebody who is present. Is one way to say it, is really present and in the moment is a good collaborator. And I don't think there's ever a perfect collaborator, because I think we all have, like I said, elements that can make you a better collaborator, but you can grow. There are people who are not collaborators, but unfortunately, they could be very important to your collaboration, and then you have to work with them.
Yeah, and that's part of that trust building that you were talking about from the very beginning, because if you're establishing relationships that build trust, what we often see is that it creates the willingness in people who are not natural collaborators to step into the collaborative process, at least enough, right? That the key participation that's needed from them happens. Right? That they may not dive into the deep end of the pool, but you get them to come down the baby steps because of the relationship that you have.
And there are people who, like I said, will come to the collaboration because they have an intention in mind, and so they want to take your table towards their end, and they're not interested in really collaborating on what other people want. So that's also important to be able to navigate are folks who take up space.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So I just want to say thank you guys. I know Nika will kick this off, but you know, good luck on this. And I'm learning, and you know, I'm getting closer to be participating in the Meridian work, because I think it could be very valuable for me.
Yeah, and I really want to thank Tara for taking the time in her busy. Oh, that's great! Look at the mahalo.
I missed it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stop the share at this point and bring us all back into the gallery view. And I also want to thank you for the engagement and the storytelling that you shared and everything, because that always makes the dialogue really rich. For anybody that winds up as viewers, I also want to encourage you to look into the Meridian University Integral MBA in Creative Enterprise. And we're at www.meridianuniversity.edu. And you can contact us for a one-on-one conversation as well. We're just so excited to have people like Tara, who are, just really amazing practitioners, support the learning in the program and engage with us like this.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll say hi. I'll come try to find you when I'm at the hub next.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Have a beautiful night.
You
Bye.
too.
Thank
Okay,
you.
bye-bye.